Imagine this. It is 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, way too early.
Right, way too early. You are dead asleep, completely submerged in that heavy, dreamless phase of the night. And then suddenly the harsh, jarring vibration of your phone alarm just rattles against the solid wood of your nightstand.
I can literally hear that sound in my head right now. It is awful.
It really is. And it doesn't just wake you up, It shocks your entire nervous system into existence. Your heart spikes. You groan, throw off the heavy covers, and swing your legs over the side of the bed.
Yep, the daily grind begins.
Exactly. Your bare feet hit the bathroom floor tiles, and they are freezing. Absolutely freezing. You shuffle into the kitchen, blindly hit the button on the coffee maker, and within a few moments, that familiar smell hits you.
That slightly over-roasted, maybe a little bitter smell?
Yeah, you know the exact one. It is the undeniable smell of waking up and facing reality. You walk back into the bathroom, leaning heavily over the porcelain sink, and you just stare at the person in the mirror while you drag a toothbrush across your teeth.
We have all been that person in the mirror.
We really have. Let us think about this anonymous protagonist for a moment. This person in the mirror. Well, let us just acknowledge that it is someone we all know intimately. Maybe it is your best friend. Maybe it is your colleague. Honestly, maybe it is you.
Most likely it is you. I mean, it is me, certainly.
Because on paper, this person has a remarkably good life. A decent job that pays the bills, a nice apartment with decent natural light, people in their life who genuinely care about them. But right there, sitting tight and heavy in the center of their chest, right behind the breastbone, is an invisible, tangled knot of anxiety.
And it's just always there, humming.
Yes, humming, just this constant background radiation.
It really is the background noise of modern existence for an enormous number of people. That relentless hum, the quiet, persistent, almost suffocating feeling that despite the good job, despite the decent apartment,
Despite checking all the boxes.
right, despite checking all the boxes society told you to check, something is fundamentally, structurally out of alignment. You wake up with it vibrating in your chest, you carry it onto the subway, you bring it to your desk at work.
And you drag it back home to your living room couch.
Exactly. It is exhausting, primarily because it is invisible. You cannot point to a broken bone or a specific crisis, yet your nervous system is perpetually acting as if there is a predator in the room.
I am so glad you mentioned the invisibility of it, because it manifests in these seemingly mundane, everyday moments that we usually just brush off. Take our person in the mirror, for example.
Yeah, let's look at them.
They are standing on the concrete platform, waiting for the morning train to work. The wind is a little sharp. They pull out their smartphone to check their banking app. Now, logically, they know they got paid last week.
They know the money is there.
Right. They know they make a perfectly good, above-average salary. But they look at the balance on the screen, and their stomach drops. It is always inexplicably lower than it should be. Money flows into the account, sure, but it slips through their fingers like dry sand.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
It is. They cannot seem to hold on to it no matter how many budgeting apps they download. Or let's fast forward a few hours. They are at the office, sitting at their desk. The fluorescent overhead lights are buzzing with that faint, high-pitched electrical hum.
Oh, I know that hum. It drives you crazy if you focus on it.
Totally. Their leather office chair squeaks as they shift their weight. Their boss walks up and asks an incredibly simple, mundane question about a quarterly project. Nothing hostile, just a standard, everyday managerial question.
But I'm guessing our protagonist does not react normally.
No, instantly they freeze. A cold sweat prickles the back of their neck, their throat tightens, their mind goes completely, utterly blank. They feel exactly like a 7-year-old child who just got called on in the middle of math class and has absolutely no idea what the answer is.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a very real, visceral reaction. And if we look at the sheer mechanics of that moment, the disproportionate nature of the reaction is what really demands our attention today.
Because it doesn't make logical sense, right?
Not at all. A simple, informational question from a mid-level manager should not, biologically speaking, trigger a physiological life or death threat response. A steady, reliable income should not result in a chronic, gnawing feeling of financial panic and scarcity.
It's like the external reality completely fails to match the internal alarm bells.
Exactly. The physical environment, the safety of the office, the steady paycheck is perfectly fine. But the psychological environment is an absolute war zone.
And it gets so much more complicated when we bring other human beings into this chaotic mix. Later that same evening, this exact same person gets into an argument with their romantic partner. Just a silly, trivial dispute over, like, loading the dishwasher.
Or who forgot to take the recycling out. It is always the small things.
Always. Something completely meaningless. But suddenly, voices get raised, the tension snaps, and right in the middle of shouting, pointing a finger, our protagonist stops dead in their tracks.
Because of a realization.
Yes, because with a sudden, sinking, terrible feeling of dread, they realize I sound exactly like my mother. Or I sound exactly like my father. It is as if a ghost just possessed their vocal cords.
They swore they would never use that specific tone of voice, and yet, there it is.
There it is. And that brings us to our mission for this exploration today. We're looking at a really fascinating stack of psychological and personal development materials that explain the underlying mechanics of why we hit these invisible walls.
It is such an important topic.
It really is. Our entire goal in this conversation is to pull apart the emotional blueprints that were meticulously drafted for us, completely without our consent, before we even knew how to speak a single word.
I think it is absolutely paramount to set a very specific, grounded tone for you, the listener, right from the opening moments of this analysis. This is not an exercise in assigning blame.
Right, we're not trying to just be angry at our family.
Exactly. We are not sitting here to put your parents on trial, to vilify your caregivers, or to drag up the painful past just to wallow in it. This is strictly about mechanics.
I like that word, mechanics.
It is about understanding the invisible legacy software that is currently running your daily adult hardware. Once you truly understand the lines of code that were programmed into you, you stop blaming yourself for the daily bugs in the system.
You stop hating yourself for the anxiety.
Yes, and you can actually begin the methodical, empowering work of rewriting that code.
I love that analogy of the legacy software. It perfectly sets up the foundation of everything we are looking at in these sources. The materials point us immediately to a very specific, highly critical window of human development, the blank slate phase.
The crucial years, from birth to roughly age 7.
Now, I know we all generally accept that childhood is important, but these notes frame this specific window as something far more profound than just, learning the ropes of life.
Oh, it is the absolute bedrock. This is perhaps the most crucial concept to internalize if you want to understand why you operate the way you do today. Between the ages of 0 and 7, a human child possesses virtually zero analytical reasoning capabilities.
So they aren't logic-driven at all.
Not even a little bit. We are talking about the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that handles complex logic, rational deduction, and the filtering of incoming information. During these early years, that entire neurological apparatus is largely underdeveloped.
So what is their brain actually doing then?
Instead of analyzing the world, the child's brain operates primarily in what neuroscientists call a theta brainwave state.
Right, and the theta state is essentially the exact same frequency the brain enters when a person is under hypnosis, isn't it?
Precisely. It is a state of hyperreceptivity. It is a state of pure, unfiltered download. Imagine an incredibly absorbent sponge that has absolutely no physical mechanism to decide what type of liquid it wants to soak up.
It just takes in whatever it sits in.
Exactly. It just takes in whatever environment it happens to be submerged in, whether that liquid is clean water or toxic sludge. A child in this specific developmental window is not observing the world and making rational judgments about it.
They're literally recording it.
Raw, unedited, and completely devoid of context. They are downloading the emotional and psychological environment directly into their subconscious mind, treating every single observation as absolute, undeniable fact.
Okay, I need to understand the mechanism here. How exactly are they downloading this? Because it's not like these toddlers are sitting on the couch with a notepad while their parents give explicit verbal lectures on household economics or conflict resolution, right?
No, they certainly aren't taking notes.
It has to be much more subtle than that.
It is entirely subtle, and it occurs through specialized brain cells known as mirror neurons. These are fascinating neurological structures that fire not only when we perform a physical action ourselves, but also when we simply observe someone else performing that action.
So it's about observation.
But it goes far beyond mimicking a physical wave or a smile. Children learn how to navigate the complex landscape of human existence by literally copying the energetic frequencies, the microscopic behavioral cues, and the quiet, unspoken, deeply held beliefs of their primary caregivers.
Let me put a picture to this, because translating the neuroscience into a real-world setting really helps me wrap my head around it.
Please do.
Imagine you are a 5-year-old child. You are sitting on this scratchy wool rug in your living room, playing with a set of brightly colored wooden blocks. You are stacking them up, watching them wobble, and letting them fall down.
A very standard childhood scene.
Right. Consciously, you are learning about gravity, balance, and shapes. But according to this material, the real education is happening in the background. You are not just learning from the wooden blocks, you are absorbing everything happening in the room above your head.
The emotional weather of the room.
Exactly. You are absorbing the heavy, suffocating, thick silence between your parents who are sitting on the sofa but haven't spoken a single word to each other in an hour. You are absorbing the tight-lipped, exhausted, terrified sigh your parent makes when they open a stack of bills from the mail.
Or, conversely, the positive stuff, too.
Yeah. Or you are absorbing the relaxed, boisterous, easy laughter when they have friends over and feel completely safe. The child's fragile nervous system is essentially acting like a highly sensitive thermostat, syncing up with the emotional temperature of the room.
That is a phenomenal illustration of the concept. The child's brain is constantly, obsessively asking a vital biological question. It wants to know, what are the rules of this specific environment?
And why is it so obsessed with that?
We have to look at evolutionary biology. It is pure, unadulterated survival instinct. A human infant is one of the most entirely defenseless creatures on the planet. They cannot run, they cannot fight, they cannot forage.
They're completely dependent.
Completely. In order to survive, a child absolutely must maintain their belonging to the family unit. To ensure they belong, they intuitively, biologically match the frequency of the household. They have to blend in.
Because sticking out is dangerous.
Historically speaking, if they are fundamentally discordant with the pack, they risk abandonment. And to a child's primitive brain, abandonment equals death.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on this a little bit because I want to make sure I am truly grasping the severity of this mechanism. Let's take a hypothetical scenario.
Sure, let's hear it.
Let's say I grew up in a house where there was no overt abuse, no screaming, no terrible trauma, just a normal house. But my parents were chronically, silently anxious about paying the mortgage every single month. They never talked about it to me, but the anxiety was just in the air.
The silent tension.
Yeah. Are you telling me that my 7-year-old brain hardwired that specific unspoken anxiety into my own developing identity, that it actually became a permanent fixture of who I consider myself to be today?
Yes. That is exactly what the mechanics of the theta state dictate. Because remember, the child does not possess the cognitive architecture to rationalize the situation.
So I couldn't understand the mortgage.
Right. A 7-year-old cannot say, well, my mother and father are currently exhibiting signs of chronic stress because the macroeconomic environment is poor, inflation is high, and they have an adjustable rate mortgage. The child's brain completely lacks that context.
So what does the brain record instead?
The child's brain simply records the raw data. It says life is inherently stressful, resources are scarce and terrifying. A state of low-grade anxiety is the normal, expected baseline state of human existence.
Wow. It just accepts that as reality.
It does. The child's nervous system calibrates its own cortisol and adrenaline production to match that anxiety, treating it as the standard operating temperature for survival. What begins as an external observation of the parents solidifies over time into an internal personality trait.
And then 30 years later.
Fast forward 30 years, and you grow up firmly believing you were just an anxious person, completely unaware that you were simply replaying a downloaded survival program from a scratchy living room rug decades ago.
That is deeply unsettling, but honestly, incredibly clarifying. It is like having an app running in the background of your smartphone that you never intentionally downloaded.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah, it is constantly draining your battery and tracking your location, and you just think your phone is inherently flawed. You don't realize there's this invisible drain.
That is a brilliant analogy. The background app refresh is consuming all your processing power, but because you cannot see the app icon on your home screen, you never think to force quit it. You just accept the drained battery as your reality.
So how does this all translate when we start breaking down the specific nuanced roles of the caregivers in that environment? Because the materials we are exploring today make a very distinct, fascinating, and quite profound division.
Yes, the division between the primary nurturing caregiver and the primary protective caregiver.
Right, which the text archetypally represents as the mother and the father. Let's start with the mother blueprint. The text describes the mother figure as the grand architect of our inner world.
The concept of the inner world is vital to understand. It is our internal sanctuary. It encompasses our fundamental capacity to give and receive love without fear.
Like our baseline for connection.
Exactly. It dictates our deeply held sense of belonging to the broader human family, and crucially, it governs our baseline feelings of abundance versus scarcity. The mother figure, or that primary nurturing presence, represents our rootedness.
Because it's our first real contact.
It is literally the very first relationship we have with life itself outside the womb. If the primary nurturer provides a safe, welcoming, consistent, and emotionally regulated presence, the child's nervous system learns a foundational truth.
Which is what?
The truth that the world is fundamentally safe. I belong here. Life is designed to hold me and support me.
The mirror of self-worth. That is a specific phrase from the notes that really stuck with me, and honestly, the implications are stark. The idea suggests that as adults walking around today, we can only truly feel as lovable, as worthy of deep connection, as we were consistently made to feel by our primary nurturing figure.
It is a highly confronting reality to face. But the neurological blueprint for love is drawn incredibly early. If that initial love was expressed through consistent, warm, regulated physical touch.
Oh, the sensory cues. Like the soft, repetitive, patient brushing of a child's tangled hair, or that very specific, profoundly comforting smell of vanilla extract baking in the kitchen.
Yes, those little details.
Or even the warm, clean laundry detergent on their sweater when they pull you into a hug after you scrape your knee. Those tiny micro moments of sensory safety.
Exactly. Those specific sensory inputs wire the brain's dopamine and oxytocin pathways to understand that love is abundant, easily accessible, and inherently safe. The child's brain wires a connection that says, proximity to others equals comfort.
And then that child grows up.
That child inevitably grows into an adult who can love openly, trustingly, and without a constant underlying terror of abandonment. But we have to look at the flip side.
What happens when it goes wrong?
If the primary caregiver was physically distant, emotionally checked out, constantly overwhelmed by their own trauma, or highly critical, the child's brain learns a radically different lesson about the mechanics of love.
It learns love is scarce.
It learns that affection is highly conditional. It learns that love must be fiercely earned through intense, exhausting effort, or worse, that it might be arbitrarily withdrawn without warning at any given moment.
And here is where it gets incredibly practical, because we can tie this theoretical psychology directly back to our protagonist, the person in the mirror we talked about at the beginning.
The chronic people pleaser.
Yes. We asked earlier why they might be a chronic people pleaser. Why do they accept the absolute bare minimum in their romantic relationships, constantly staying with partners who clearly do not prioritize them, while making excuses for their bad behavior?
You can trace the lineage of that exact behavioral pattern straight back to the early maternal blueprint we just discussed. If you lacked that early unconditional maternal validation, you develop a profound, driving adult fear of abandonment.
So the people-pleasing isn't actually about being a nice person.
The chronic people-pleasing you see in adulthood is not actually kindness, no. It is a sophisticated survival strategy. It is the adult version of the terrified child trying desperately to perfectly calibrate to the mother's volatile moods in order to avoid being ignored or rejected.
Well, it changes everything.
The exhausting cycle of constantly over-accommodating others, of never saying no, is simply the inner child operating the adult machinery, crying out, if I am perfectly useful to you, if I am perfectly compliant and demand nothing, maybe then you will stay.
Maybe then, finally, I will be enough to warrant existence.
Exactly.
It is heartbreaking when you frame it like that. It strips away all the judgment we usually level at people pleasers. But there's another aspect to this mother blueprint that completely blindsided me when I read the materials.
The connection to finances?
Yes. The text explicitly and emphatically links our early relationship with the nurturing figure to our adult relationship with money and financial abundance. I have to admit, when I first read that, my logical brain kind of recoiled. It sounds a bit woo-woo.
It really does.
I mean, how does my mom's emotional availability correlate to my checking account balance? It seems like a huge leap.
I completely understand the skepticism. It absolutely sounds esoteric on the surface. But if you look at the underlying mechanics of the nervous system, it makes flawless logical sense.
Walk me through it.
The primary nurturing figure, the mother archetype, represents the literal source of life for the infant. She is the provider of initial nourishment, both caloric and emotional. She is the conduit through which the infant receives sustenance from the universe.
Right. Literally food and comfort.
So if you have unresolved, deep-seated issues with that nurturing figure, if your early feeding or soothing was erratic, stressful, or withheld, Your nervous system essentially hardwires a profound sense of scarcity. It subconsciously blocks the feeling that there is enough in the world for you.
Because if your very first foundational experience of nourishment was heavily restricted, fraught with anxiety, or highly conditional, you naturally project that same restriction onto the world at large.
Your brain maps it outward.
Your brain says, well, the source of life is stingy, therefore life itself is stingy.
Precisely. The critical nuance here is that it is not necessarily about the mechanical, physical act of earning a paycheck. You might be highly skilled and capable of generating income.
So you can be a high earner and still feel this.
Absolutely. It is about the deeply held, subconscious feeling of deservingness and safety. Do you feel worthy of the uninterrupted flow of life's bounties? People who carry unresolved scarcity wounds from their primary nurturer often struggle immensely to feel truly abundant, no matter how much wealth they actually accumulate.
They just can't relax into it.
They live in a constant, terrifying state of impending lack. They could have $1 million in the bank and their nervous system still operates as if they are one missed meal away from starvation, because the original wound of not enough was never healed.
The bank account changes, but the nervous system remains trapped on the scratchy rug.
Exactly.
That perfectly explains the feeling of the money slipping through the fingers from our earlier example. Okay, so if the mother figure, the nurturing archetype, is the inner sanctuary, the emotional hearth of the house, the father figure represents something entirely different in this psychological framework.
A completely different energetic domain.
The material frames the paternal energy as the front door, the heavy armor you strap on when you step out of the house and into the chaotic street.
Yes. The father's domain, archetypally speaking, within these developmental frameworks, governs the outer world. It dictates our trajectory in our career, our public-facing self-confidence, our ability to stand firm in our boundaries when challenged by peers.
In our relationship with authority.
Crucially, yes, our relationship with institutional and structural authority figures.
Let us immediately go back to our person in the mirror. They're sitting in their cubicle. The hum of the fluorescent overhead lights is buzzing. Their leather chair squeaks. Their boss, a person representing structural authority, asks a simple question about a spreadsheet, and they just freeze.
Their mind flatlines.
Their throat closes up. Why? Why the massive overreaction?
That visceral freeze response is a direct, unfiltered transmission from the past. How the child viewed and experienced the father's authority becomes the exact, rigid template they subconsciously overlay onto every boss, every university professor, every police officer.
Even the government or banks.
Exactly, life's broader institutional authorities. If the paternal authority in the home was tyrannical, unpredictable, prone to sudden rage, or intensely, coldly critical, the child's nervous system learns a very simple rule.
Authority is dangerous.
Authority is inherently dangerous and must be feared.
I see. So in that moment in the cubicle, the boss is no longer just Dave from accounting, asking about a quarterly projection. Through the lens of the traumatized nervous system, Dave from accounting instantly morphs into the towering, angry, unpredictable father figure.
And Dave has no idea this is happening.
Right. And the adult employee, despite their college degree and professional experience, reverts instantly to the terrified 7-year-old trying to avoid a punishment.
Because the brain prioritizes survival over professional decorum. It doesn't care about the spreadsheet. But we must also look at the other extreme.
What happens if the father figure wasn't angry, but just absent?
If the father figure was entirely absent, completely passive, or incredibly weak in the face of the mother's dominance, the child might struggle to respect authority at all. Or they might completely flounder in the outer world because they were never given a model of healthy, structured, grounded assertion.
So they never learned how to hold their ground.
They were never taught the mechanics of holding their ground without resorting to violence or collapsing into submission. They lack the architectural support to build a robust external life.
There's a really fascinating distinction made in the sources regarding the mechanics of money, too, tying into this outer world concept. We just talked extensively about the mother archetype and abundance, the flow of nourishment coming toward you, but the father blueprint governs something entirely different.
Power and retention.
Yes, power and retention. It is the structural vessel that actually holds the flow.
Think of it structurally like a reservoir or a bucket. A weak, absent, or highly problematic paternal energy often correlates directly to issues with holding on to success and wealth. You might possess the mother-driven abundance mindset required to actually make the money.
The water freely flows into the bucket.
But because you lack the father-driven structural integrity, you cannot keep it. The bucket is riddled with holes. The structural integrity is completely compromised.
Oh, wow. That is exactly our protagonist checking the bank app on the train platform.
Hmm.
The money comes in every 2 weeks, but it just evaporates. It is not an earning problem. It is a retention problem.
Exactly. And the mechanism behind this is fascinating. You might push yourself and finally get the big promotion, but the moment you achieve it, an intense, unhealed wave of imposter syndrome kicks in.
Because you feel like a fraud.
You subconsciously believe you do not actually belong in a position of authority or wealth because you never internalized a healthy model of what authority or wealth looks like. So the nervous system panics at the unfamiliar feeling of success, and you begin to self-sabotage to return to a familiar baseline.
How does that self-sabotage actually look?
You make careless mistakes on important projects, you unnecessarily alienate your supportive team members, or you blow your annual bonus on frivolous, depreciating assets just to relieve the subconscious anxiety of actually holding on to wealth.
You aggressively drain your own bucket.
Because holding on to the water feels fundamentally structurally unsafe to your nervous system.
Okay, I have a major question here. A significant point of friction that I really need to push back on, because I can hear the audience yelling it at their devices right now.
I think I know what you're going to ask.
When we talk about the mother providing this and the father doing that, is this strictly biological? Are we asserting that women inherently and exclusively provide inner emotional security, and men inherently and exclusively provide outer confidence and structure? Because, frankly, in the modern world, that feels incredibly reductive, outdated, and frankly inaccurate.
It would be highly inaccurate.
What about single parents who have to do it all? What about same-sex parents? What about households where the traditional gender roles are completely intentionally flipped?
I am extremely glad you brought this up because it is a crucial point of clarification. And failure to understand this leads to completely misinterpreting the psychology. When the materials use the terms mother and father, they are not referring to biological sex.
So it's a metaphor.
They are using those terms as shorthand for ancient energetic archetypes. We are talking strictly about the specific energetic roles played within the child's environment. We are contrasting the nurturing, inward-facing, softening energy against the protective, outward-facing, structuring, authoritative energy.
So anyone can embody those energies.
These roles are entirely fluid and entirely detached from biology. A biological father can absolutely provide the profound, nurturing, inner sanctuary energy. A biological mother can absolutely be the primary representative of outer world authority, discipline, and structural confidence.
Okay, let me make sure I'm tracking this. So a child's developing brain is essentially just a survival computer. It needs to categorize the inputs it receives to build a map of reality.
It sorts the data.
It needs to ask, okay, who in this environment is teaching me how to be safe inside my own heart and emotional landscape? And who in this environment is teaching me how to be safe out there in the dangerous jungle? And whoever happens to occupy those specific energetic spaces, regardless of their gender, becomes the blueprint for those distinct psychological pillars.
Precisely. The child's developing brain simply takes the available inputs and files them into the necessary survival folders, inner security, and outer confidence. The brain does not care about the gender of the person delivering the data. It only cares about the quality and consistency of the data itself.
Which brings us to a phenomenon that is so universally common, it's almost a cliche, and yet it is perhaps the most painfully ironic part of this entire exploration. The trap of saying, I will never be like them.
Oh, yes. The famous last words.
I think every single person listening right now knows someone, or, if we're being brutally honest with ourselves, is it someone who swore up and down with absolute fiery, self-righteous conviction that they would never, ever act like their parents.
We all make that promise.
And then they hit age 35 or 40. They get into a mildly stressful situation. Maybe they're tired and hungry. They open their mouth to speak to their partner or their child, and out comes their mother's exact biting phrasing or their father's exact dismissive tone of voice.
It really is the great cosmic joke of human psychological development. But it is not a joke. There is a very sound, very rigid neurological mechanism driving it. The materials we are referencing discuss the neuroscience of avoidance in detail.
How does avoidance actually backfire?
Here is the mechanical reality. When you constantly, actively, fiercely run away from a specific behavior, your brain must remain intensely, perpetually focused on that specific behavior in order to monitor your distance from it.
Oh, I see where this is going. It is like driving a car. If you stare obsessively at the pothole you are desperately trying to avoid, your hands naturally steer the wheel directly into the pothole.
That is exactly what happens.
To ensure you aren't being like your dad, You would essentially have to keep your dad's worst traits front and center on the dashboard of your mind at all times.
That driving analogy is perfectly accurate. The brain operates using a network called the reticular activating system, which filters information based on what you are focusing on. Crucially, your subconscious mind does not process the word don't effectively in this context.
So it just ignores the negative.
It does not hear don't be angry like dad. It simply processes the primary focal point, angry like dad. By resisting the behavior so fiercely, you are essentially pouring massive amounts of your psychological energy and attention into that exact neural pathway.
You are strengthening it by fighting it.
You myelinate those specific neurons, you accidentally magnetize the very trait you despise. You build your entire adult identity around it, even if your conscious intent is in opposition to it.
And then what happens under stress?
Eventually, inevitably, under the heavy stress of daily life, when your conscious, rational filters drop because you are tired or triggered, you will default to the strongest, most heavily trafficked neural pathway in your brain, which is, ironically, the exact blueprint of the parent you spent 30 years running from.
That is terrifying. But it makes so much sense. And this mechanism of avoidance and subconscious replication plays out so dramatically in our romantic lives. This is a huge question we need to talk about. Why do we do this in dating?
Romantic replays.
Why do we consistently, predictably end up dating people who trigger our absolute oldest, deepest, most painful childhood wounds? You see it all the time. People whose father was chronically emotionally unavailable will go out into a world of billions of people and predictably date a string of partners who absolutely refuse to commit.
Or someone whose mother was relentlessly, verbally critical will somehow manage to marry the one person in their social circle who constantly nitpicks everything they do.
Exactly. Why would biology, which is designed for survival, make us seek out pain?
It seems entirely counterintuitive until you understand what the subconscious is actually trying to accomplish. This is where the subconscious reveals its hidden, desperate strategy. Your conscious adult mind says, I am smart, I want a healthy, loving, supportive partner.
But the subconscious isn't on board.
No, the subconscious mind, that deeply entrenched inner child we have been talking about, is still trapped on the scratchy living room rug. It never left. The inner child is actively trying to go back in time to fix the broken parent.
Let me stop you. We are trying to fix the parent by using a proxy. So we purposefully find a romantic partner who shares the exact same fatal flaws as our caregiver.
Yes, because the subconscious mind holds on to a profound tragic belief. It believes that if you can just win the love of this emotionally unavailable person, if you can just contort yourself enough to get this highly critical person to finally accept and praise you, then you will somehow retroactively heal the original wound.
You are trying to win the unwinnable game of your childhood.
You are setting up the exact same chessboard with the exact same pieces, hoping that this time, through sheer force of will, you can force a checkmate.
It is like that incredibly familiar, awful, visceral sting of an ignored text message from someone you are casually dating. You are staring at the bright screen of your phone, you see the read receipt, and your chest physically tightens. Your throat closes up. The anxiety is overwhelming.
It is a terrible feeling.
But the reaction isn't actually about the text message, is it? It is mirroring the exact, precise physiological feeling of being 8 years old, sitting on the cold concrete of the front porch, waiting for a parent who promised to pick you up but forgot.
The brain recognizes the chemical cocktail of that specific pain.
And it says, ah, yes, I know this feeling intimately. This feeling is home, even though home feels absolutely terrible.
The profound familiarity of the pain is exactly what makes it so dangerously magnetic. To the human nervous system, a predictable, known misery is always infinitely preferable to an unpredictable, unknown joy.
Joy feels unsafe.
Joy feels inherently unsafe to a traumatized nervous system because it is an unknown variable. You don't have a map for joy. But the ignored text message, the harsh criticism, the cold shoulder, those are known variables. You know exactly how to survive those because you already survived them once.
I want to take a moment and shift our perspective here. Because the materials we are studying take a really profound, almost radical philosophical turn right around this point. A complete paradigm shift.
Yes, moving away from just the biology.
Up until now, we've been looking at all of this from a very mechanistic, neurobiological, psychological perspective. Cause and effect, stimulus and response. But the text begins to ask a much deeper, almost existential question. What if all these difficulties, these painful blueprints, these childhood struggles weren't just random bad luck or biological accidents?
This introduces a concept that is often referred to as the soul's curriculum, or the idea of a predetermined life plan. It is a major shift in framing. It moves us entirely from a posture of victimhood, the mindset of, look at this terrible thing that happened to me. I am broken to a posture of profound agency, purpose, and meaning.
So it's about finding the lesson.
The central premise is that on some level of consciousness that exists far beyond our everyday rational awareness, we actually required the exact specific conditions of our childhood to learn the specific necessary lessons we are meant to master in this lifetime.
Okay, I have to be honest, my initial reaction to this is massive immediate resistance.
Oh.
And I think a lot of listeners will feel the same way. It borders on victim blaming if not handled carefully.
That is a very valid concern.
Are you seriously suggesting that if my core life lesson was to learn true, unshakable self-worth, the universe or my soul intentionally placed me in a toxic family environment where I was systematically made to feel completely, utterly worthless? Are we justifying bad parenting as some sort of cosmic schoolhouse?
That is the natural and completely valid pushback. Let me be unequivocally clear, this framework does not excuse, justify, or condone abuse or neglect in any form. Caregivers are entirely responsible for their actions.
Okay, good. So how do we interpret it then?
We are looking at this from the perspective of the individual's lifelong internal development. The concept relies on the law of contrast. Think about it in strict physical terms. You cannot build a dense, strong muscle by lifting a feather.
You need resistance.
You build muscle exclusively through the application of heavy resistance and the tearing of fibers. You cannot build genuine, internal, self-generated emotional resilience if you have never had to stand up against a strong, opposing wind. If everything is provided for you, you never learn how to generate it yourself.
I see. So if you are born into a family that showers you with perfect, unwavering validation every second of the day, you certainly learn that you are valuable, but you learn that you are valuable because they constantly tell you so.
The source of your worth is external.
But if you are born into an environment that ignores you, neglects you, or criticizes you, you are forced to go on a grueling, painful, lifelong journey to discover that you are inherently valuable simply because you exist. You are forced to mine that worth from deep inside yourself, making it unbreakable because it doesn't rely on anyone else's opinion.
Precisely. The contrast provides the necessary curriculum. The darkness teaches you the profound value of the light you have to strike yourself. There is a very specific, illuminating example given in the text that highlights this beautifully.
What is the example?
It talks about a hypothetical person who realizes their lifelong defining tendency is to be too good. They are the ultimate self-sacrificing martyr. They constantly, obsessively sacrifice their own balance, their own physical energy, and their own fundamental needs for the sake of everyone else around them.
And the tragic part is, society absolutely applauds that behavior. We love a martyr. We give them awards. We praise them for being so selfless.
Society praises it because it is convenient for society, but it completely destroys the individual from the inside out. The realization this person eventually has to come to their specific soul's curriculum is that true, authentic goodness does not mean erasing your own boundaries.
So they have to learn to say no.
They had to learn the painful lesson that allowing people to constantly cross their boundaries under the socially acceptable guise of being nice was actually a profound betrayal of themselves. They had to learn how to stand firm and tolerate the discomfort of others being disappointed in them.
And their childhood forced that lesson.
To learn that monumental lesson, they likely grew up in a chaotic environment that constantly, relentlessly demanded they abandon their own needs in order to keep the peace and survive. The chaotic environment was the necessary resistance training for them to eventually learn the absolute necessity of boundaries.
That reframing really does change everything. It changes the narrative from a tragedy to a hero's journey. It changes the problematic parent from a pure villain into a kind of deeply unaware, highly flawed teacher of the hardest lesson you ever needed to learn.
A difficult teacher, but a teacher nonetheless.
Which leads us perfectly to the ultimate practical question, the so what of this entire hour. If we're currently walking around running this invisible, outdated, scratchy rug software, how do we actually rewrite the code?
The materials provide a crucial, absolutely non-negotiable first step if you want to achieve any real change. We must actively, consciously dethrone our caregivers.
Dethrone them. That is a powerful phrase.
It is necessary because society heavily conditions us from birth to idolize our parents, to view them as infallible gods, the ultimate authorities who always knew best and had our best interests at heart.
And when they fail us?
When the parents inevitably fail us, because all humans are flawed and fail, we experience massive, paralyzing guilt for feeling angry at a god. To begin the healing process, we have to intentionally step out of the mindset of the terrified, dependent 5-year-old and look at our parents with sober, objective, adult eyes.
We have to force ourselves to see them as just, people.
Uh,
Flawed, struggling, likely traumatized human beings who are probably just blindly passing down their own unhealed programming from their own scratchy living room rugs that they experience with their own parents.
Exactly. You realize, often with a profound sense of grief, that they simply could not give you what they fundamentally did not possess themselves. A starving person cannot offer you bread.
That brings up forgiveness, doesn't it?
This realization naturally organically transitions into the concept of acceptance and forgiveness. But I want to be extremely careful and precise here. Acceptance is absolutely not about excusing toxic or abusive behavior. It does not mean you have to invite a deeply unhealthy person to your house for Sunday dinner.
The physics of forgiveness. That is how I conceptualize it after reading this. It is an energetic necessity for your own biological survival, not a moral favor you were doing for them.
That is the perfect way to look at it. If you stay deeply anchored in resentment, if you feed the anger every single day, you remain energetically and neurologically tied to the exact person who hurt you. You are carrying them heavily on your back everywhere you go.
I want to give the listener a physical analogy for this because it blew my mind when I tried it. Seriously, if you were listening to this right now and you're in a safe place, try this. Imagine making a tight fist with your dominant hand.
Just squeezing as hard as you can.
Squeeze your fingers as hard as you possibly can, feeling your fingernails digging sharply into your palm. The muscles in your forearm tighten. Now imagine holding that incredibly tight, painful fist for an hour, or a whole day, or, for many of us, 30 years.
That sounds exhausting.
Think about the cramping, the sheer exhaustion, the dull ache radiating up your arm into your shoulder. Your entire body is tense, just maintaining that grip. Now imagine finally, slowly, opening your fingers, letting the hand completely relax.
The relief would be instant.
Feeling the sudden warm rush of blood back into your palm, the immense, overwhelming relief of just putting the tension down. That physical release, that sudden lack of exhausting effort, is exactly what letting go of old parental resentment feels like to your nervous system.
It's just stopping the effort of being angry.
You aren't saying making the fist was a good idea. You aren't saying the person who made you tense up was right. You are just finally deciding to stop hurting your own hand.
That is a beautiful, visceral analogy, and the science supports it. Once you open that hand, once you finally release the exhausting grip of the past, you suddenly have the psychological and energetic space to utilize neuroplasticity.
The science of neuroplasticity is the ultimate message of hope here.
It proves definitively that we are not doomed. The human brain is not hardwired in wet concrete. It is much more like a dense, overgrown forest. You can forge completely new paths.
But forging a new path through a dense, thorny forest takes incredible work. You don't just casually walk through the brush one time and magically have a paved 4-lane highway. The old path, the one your parents built, is already paved. It is easy to walk down.
Precisely. Forging the new path requires daily, conscious, highly willful action. It is about the relentless repetition of small, intentional choices.
What does that look like in daily life?
It is feeling the overwhelming, familiar urge to scream during an argument with your partner, feeling that old, inherited, myelinated pathway lighting up like a Christmas tree, and choosing in that microsecond to take a single deep breath instead.
Just a tiny pause.
Or it is feeling the crushing panic of financial scarcity when you look at your bank app and choosing to deliberately, calmly transfer $10 into a savings account to physically prove to your brain that you can, in fact, hold on to wealth.
You are proving to your nervous system that things are different now.
Slowly, painstakingly, day by day, choice by choice, you pave new roads in the brain. And as you walk the new roads, the old childhood blueprints begin to fade and decay from simple disuse.
It is truly incredible. When you pull back and reflect on the sweeping journey we have taken over the course of this hour, it is wild to think about where we started. We started with our protagonist, frustrated, standing on a cold concrete train platform staring in a panic at a bank app. And we trace that exact specific feeling all the way back through the neurological pathways to the energetic inheritance of a childhood living room.
It shows how profoundly interconnected our past and present really are.
And the core, resounding message I want everyone to take away from this analysis is one of profound empowerment. You are not simply a helpless sequel to your parents' story. You are not a broken computer running a malicious virus that you cannot uninstall.
You are the programmer. The keyboard is in front of you. You have the pen in your hand right now, and you can write the next line of code.
You absolutely do. And as we wrap up our conversation today, I want to leave you with a final, slightly different thought to mull over. Something we haven't touched on yet, but that builds on everything we've discussed. We've talked deeply about rewriting your own code for your own peace of mind. But consider the emerging science of epigenetics.
The study of how our behaviors change our gene expression.
Yes, how our environment can cause changes that affect the way our genes work. Science is now suggesting that trauma leaves a chemical mark on our actual genetic code, which can be passed down to the next generation. But here is the miraculous part. If neuroplasticity allows you to change your brain, it also means you might be changing those genetic markers.
The healing works both ways.
When you choose to take that deep breath instead of screaming, when you choose to heal your relationship with abundance, you aren't just healing your inner 7-year-old. You might literally be breaking a chain of generational trauma that stretches back centuries.
That is a staggering responsibility, but a beautiful one.
You might be rewriting the biological inheritance of children you haven't even had yet, or shifting the collective unconscious of your entire family line. Your quiet, personal moments of restraint and healing are quite literally changing the future of the human story. Think about that the next time you feel the urge to react. You have the incredible capacity to change everything. We will catch you next time.